welcome back to the channel, as today I continue my look at the Marvel Legends Wolverine 50th anniversary sets, and this is set 3 of 4, and it is a very unexpected release because it's Wolverine as a brood with Lilandra. Now, I suspect that most people will be picking this set up for the Lilandra figure. This is a figure that fans have been clamoring for many years, and I can't believe that we've not had a release before now, but hey, she's here. So let's kick off by taking a look at this packaging. Now, if you've seen any of the videos in my series so far looking at these sets, you'll know that I actually really like this packaging. It's really good to see the plastic window back where we can see the figures on display here. We have this fantastic interior card inlay which is bright and colourful. It's yellow. It really helps those figures pop when they're in the packaging, but without, you can actually see that it's a collage made up of individual panels taken from one specific image from an X-Men comic. This is absolutely great approach. I love this. It gives its own flavour, its own identity. It's unique and it's a little bit different, so I really love this. I think this is a great approach. Now, when we look at the side panel, we actually see this interesting image here of Wolverine, which may look very familiar. That's because it is taken from a comic book cover that it's been inspired by, which we'll take a look at in a moment. Now, usually what we'd see when we flip the packaging over is the other character represented. Of course, on both sides here, we're seeing Wolverine as a brood, and that is because if we look at the back of the packaging, we can see that this newly commissioned artwork is homaging that classic Uncanny X-Men cover with Wolverine as brood, and Lilandra does not feature in this artwork at all, and that's why they haven't utilised her on the side panel, which is a shame because it's a little bit inconsistent with the rest of the figures in this wave, but a really beautiful piece of work. I think this looks really stunning. Again, it's its own display piece in its own right, and I think it just looks fantastic. So I love this. I really like this approach, and I'm very pleased with what Hasbro have done here. So let's take a look at the Wolverine as a brood figure. Now, I never thought I'd own Wolverine as a brood. It just never entered my mind, but having seen it, I do think it's actually really kind of cool and very different. You have to say it is a legitimate variant. Now, if we look at this head sculpt, I think they've done a really great job. Of course, it is absolutely brand new. They've not recycled this from anywhere before. I think they've got that snarling snout perfect. I love all the teeth. I think there's a number of different paint washes running through it as well, and I just think this looks absolutely brilliant. You can even sort of see the veins sort of creeping through, bulging out of the side of the mask there, which is really cool. But there's little details on the tongue, the teeth and the gums which make this really quite visually stunning and interesting. Now, the central torso and indeed the legs are, of course, recycled from a previous Wolverine figure. We've actually seen this a few times now across the years. It's actually a really great sculpt, so why change it? Sadly, they haven't sculpted in the details of the costume. It has just been painted in. That's my only real criticism. The belt is a separate piece, so that is movable, and I think they've done a decent job. Now, there's no real paint wash running through the torso or the legs, which is disappointing, but you can see that the arms, or what would be the fleshy part of the arms, is a new piece to make this look much more like the brood skin texture, and there's a lot of paint running through this, and this is nicely sculpted, so this definitely feels a lot fresher, and it makes the whole figure feel very different to what we've had previously, which is nice. Now, if we look at the claws, it's really interesting when you look at these 4 sets how they've utilised all the different claws they've used across the years. These are the more cylindrical, the more rounded kind of claws that pop in individually. These ones have a tendency to clump together and warp quite easily in my experience, so I'm not a huge fan of these claws, to be honest. They're definitely the weakest of these four figure sets in my opinion. Now, interestingly, I think we've had these before, although usually we have the closed fist and the claws coming out of them, so I'm not sure if we've ever had the open hands with the claws popping out, so these may be new sculpts. I'm not entirely sure. We'd have to double check that one. In terms of articulation, we do have a ball joint at the top of the neck, allowing the head to spin all the way around and kind of wobble left and right, not much really. It does have a hinge though to allow the head to nod up and down. It will certainly look down a good distance, and we have this added hinge joint to allow that mouth to open and close, which is absolutely fantastic. Though it does have that wonderful butterfly joint in the top of the chest. I love this. I wish all figures came with this. And he has a ball joint in the shoulder, as well as a complementary bicep swivel. There is a double joint at the elbow, but I really struggle to get that lower arm to actually bend, so not sure how useful that is. There is a pin swivel at the wrist, allowing the hand to rotate all the way around, and of course it will hinge forwards and backwards with no issues as well. There's a straight swivel at the waist, allowing the figure to turn from side to side, and then we have a ab crunch at the top of the torso there, allowing the figure to bend forward and backwards. A pretty decent range, and it tends to bend forwards more than it does back, but it's still a good range of motion here. There's ball joints in the hips, allowing the legs to kick out to the side. There is an upper thigh swivel there. The legs will kick forwards and backwards, and then we have another double joint, this time at the knee, where the lower leg can bend all the way back, which is great, before we have this ankle rocker, allowing the foot to hinge forwards and backwards and rock from side to side. In terms of accessories, we don't get much. We just get a pair of closed fists without the claws. All in all, for a figure that I never really knew I wanted, I have to say I'm actually quite pleased with this. I'm very happy to give this 4 stars. Although it is recycling an awful lot of the figure that we've had previously, I think this is very different, and different enough to warrant the recycling here. This obviously has a brand new head sculpt with that hinged jaw, which is absolutely fantastic. The arms are new as well, and I just think it looks so visually different to anything else that it definitely warrants its release. I think it's really cool. Had this been released single carded, would I have picked it up? Maybe, I don't know. But that being said, I am glad to have it in the collection now. Okay, so next up we have probably the more exciting figure out of this 2-pack, which is of course Lilandra. This unbelievably is her debut in the Marvel Legends line. I can't believe it's 2024 and we haven't had Lilandra before now. But this is absolutely fantastic. I do think they've done a really nice job with the overall presentation. This certainly looks the part. Now if we look at this head sculpt, yeah, I think they've done a great job here. It's really nice to see some of the detail painted around the eyes there. In particular, the head sculpt itself in terms of the helmet looks really good as well. They've used a sort of metallic kind of reflective plastic which really catches the light quite nicely. It's not as chrome as I would like in a perfect world, but I think they've done a good job here, and this looks very striking. And the same thing applies to the actual torso and the body part itself, because I think they've done a good job. I really like this slightly metallic looking kind of plastic. It is quite soft. I wish there was more of a wash running through it, but we do see some nice paint detailing on the actual main torso with those black lines there, just giving it a little bit more depth and texture, which I'm always banging on about, but I think it's so important. So I think it looks good in the torso. The arms are a little bit bland. Likewise, if we look at the legs, again, whilst the plastic itself is quite nice and catches the light, it would have been nice if there was just something to enhance this, just give it a bit of shading, just make it look a little bit more authentic, a little bit more realistic, I suppose, just giving it that depth, which is just sadly missing. But otherwise, this is quite a nice figure all in all. Now, I do have to talk a little bit about the cape, and I have very mixed feelings about this cape because it is a very hard plastic. It is sculpted into place. You're not going to be able to position this in any other position. It is very, very well plasticky, unfortunately, and again we have no paintbrush running through this at all, which really needed, just to give that again that depth and texture, just make it look more authentic, make it look more realistic, I suppose, and we just don't have that here, so it just feels like you've got this big clumpy plastic, and it definitely impinges on the articulation, as we'll see in a moment. Overall, I just kind of wish they'd just given her a cloth cape. We know they do this with their Star Wars Black series, so why can't they do it with the Marvel Legends? It would make such a huge difference, I think, if we just had a cloth cape here rather than this plastic thing, which is underwhelming, to be honest, and kind of undermines what's otherwise a quite nice figure. Articulation wise, she does have a ball joint at the top of the neck, allowing the head to rotate all the way around, and she can even tilt it left and right a really healthy distance too. Now she can bend it forwards and backwards, much more than I was expecting actually, so I think this is a real triumph as well, which is great. Now she does have ball joints in the shoulder, so she can lift her arms up and out as much as that cape will allow. There is a complementary bicep swivel, and she does have double joints at the elbows there, so she can get her hand back to her head, which is really pleasing to see. And then she has a pin swivel at the wrist, allowing the hand to rotate all the way around and hinge forwards and backwards. The gauntlets are separate pieces, so they can be moved up and down. Sadly, you'll notice that she cannot bend her left arm at all. She can't get that out because the cape will not allow it. Now, she does have a ball joint at the top of her torso, allowing her to spin from side to side, lean left and right, and it will let her bend forwards and backwards as well. But again, we are a little bit restricted by that very plastic cape, which doesn't allow for her to bend back very far at all, which is a shame. Now she's got ball joints in the hips, allowing the legs to kick out to the side. There's a complementary thigh swivel there. The legs will kick forwards and they'll go back, but again, that cape is going to get in the way, which is very frustrating. But she does have a double joint at the knee, allowing that lower leg to kick all the way back. And then she has the ankle rocket, so of course the foot will pivot from side to side, and it will hinge forwards and backwards as well. Lilandra is also quite light on accessories. She does have an alternate pair of hands, a closed fist and an open palm, which is unusual, but kind of cool. And then she has a trident as well, which is a nice piece, but again, just very plastic looking. It's a shame it doesn't have more depth and texture going on in terms of paint washes to just make it look a little bit more authentic. And this is kind of a difficult figure to rate, really. So I'm going to give it 4 stars because it looks the part. Like, as much as I complain about the cape in terms of the articulation, etc., it does look quite cool when it's on display. Because it is molded into shape, it does look quite regal, it does look quite imposing, it looks like it's kind of blowing in the breeze. It does look good, actually, on the shelf, to be fair, or in the display cabinet. It looks quite good, and I also like the way she holds the trident. It looks very imposing and very regal, and I do think they've done a decent job of that. I just feel like it could have been much more enhanced, and I think if they'd used a cloth cape here and maybe just added a little bit more of a paint wash over some of the detail on the body and on this this trident accessory, then it could have been a 5-star figure. But as it is, despite my frustrations with it when I'm trying to pose it, on display it looks pretty good. All in all, quite an unusual set, this one, both in concept and execution. I do actually quite like the Wolverine as a brood. As I said, it's not one I ever expect to have, but having had it in my collection now, it's actually kind of fun. It's actually quite cool. It's got its unique visual, which is really interesting. The Lilandra is a figure I've long wanted. I am disappointed by it. That said, it does look pretty cool on display, and when you put these characters together, they look pretty cool, actually. And I imagine once we put Gladiator next to the Lilandra, it's going to look pretty cool. It'd be great if we could get a deathbed down the road. I think if I was being critical, it would have been nice if we'd maybe had an alternate unhelmeted head for Lilandra. That would have been quite nice. But all in all, pretty cool. I suspect we might get another Lilandra later on, actually, as a single card release, or maybe part of a bath wave, perhaps, something like that. Because I feel like there's room for improvement here. But as a first go, I think this is quite nice. And if this is the only Lilandra we get, then it's not bad. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos soon.